Greetings and bienvenue, MITZU. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Have you ever met a genuinely evil person in real life? Someone who had committed terrible crimes or did horrible things and felt no remorse for it. My friend ran into the band members of Lost Prophets back in the day and met Ian Watkins a few times. He said he was always distant and full of himself like a typical narcissist, and that was before all the horrific abuse allegations came out.
I am a CO in a maximum security facility. I think calling people evil over just the actions they perform is not an accurate gauge of how evil they actually are. What people do is relative to their experiences, and I believe this is where you need to start when looking at how evil someone is. A person who has lived through a life of violence does not know any better about what is right or wrong, and violence to them is relatively not evil. But someone who was brought up in a life of comfort and choice that turns to doing things contrary to their upbringing should relatively be considered more evil. This is generally the difference between inmates in the mainstream population and those that require protection. The ones in the mainstream tend to still have the basic social empathy to navigate social situations, but are simply just ordinary people acting as they know. Conversely, those that end up on protection tend to be needy narcissists who create issues everywhere they go, and originate from a much more diverse range of socioeconomic backgrounds. Evil is tangible, but it's not static. It is a relative concept that each individual person will be judged on. Committing evil is not the same as being evil. I have met very high-profile mass murderers, Chris Chans and EDPs, and deal with them on a daily basis. It's not surprising where some of them started in life to end up where they are now, and there is some that will absolutely surprise you. It is that surprise of the starting point when you will see how evil some people actually are.
Good post. Got any stories?
One that comes to mind is an inmate who in the last 12 months was eligible for parole and was granted parole. A few months prior to his release on parole, our intelligence intercepted some handwritten letters he was sending out to another prolific Minecraft YouTuber he had met in the system that detailed what he wanted to do to a 6-month-old girl when he got out. His scheduled release went ahead as planned, and he was back in the system within 2 months for new charges of a similar offense. This inmate has a chronic history of self-harm and behavioral issues while in custody to manipulate the system for placement advantages. As soon as he knew his parole was coming up, his behavior greatly improved, which helped him get parole. I believe this man is evil because I know he has an array of mental health issues, but his urges as a pedophile are so strong, they allowed him to comply in order to get the parole, which was his only pathway to reoffending, and he got exactly what he wanted. If you want to know any specifics about prison or about different types of offenders, feel free to ask.
I'd love to hear if you have more stories about Minecraft YouTubers and how they justify it, or mass murderers, or really anyone particularly unique, something you wouldn't expect.
I would not say I have heard of Minecraft YouTubers try to justify or say that they are in the right for doing what they have done. A lot of them will attempt to minimize their offending by saying they were victims themselves. Whether or not that is true is irrelevant, really. Admittedly, I couldn't think of an inmate who killed many people for no reason. All of the murderers I know were related to organized crime. For them, it was simply business. The inmate I have in mind when I'm typing this owns a security business and got caught up in 3 gang hits due to having to pay back debts he accrued from getting his business off the ground. Senseless killings are very rare. There is a very unique culture in prison that is surprisingly PC. An example of this is prisoners being very proactive and even stepping aside to make sure races are equally employed in inmate jobs. Transsexuals are also pretty protected in prison by other prisoners. Religions are also very respected. It makes the dynamic in prison very unique.
How do withdrawn spurgy types do in prison? I'm pretty sure if I ever got framed well enough to wind up in prison, I'd be passed around to death within a week.
Most of them end up in protection pretty quickly from being stood over for groceries or assaulted. Once in protection, they tend to be pretty safe. People on the spectrum, from my own experience, tend to form give-and-take relationships in prison and form very strong friendships with older prisoners for a father and son dynamic. There is another type of withdrawn loner that comes in with a prior drug habit and becomes type loud once they have redrawn and tend to do okay in the mainstream while seeking drugs.
Makes sense, thanks. I didn't know protection was a thing.
Just to clear up what protection isn't segregation. Protection is a group of inmates who are all seeking protection that are put together. The caveat is that the behavioral standards are much higher. If you are charged with a correctional facility offense while in protection, your protection order is revoked and you are placed back in the mainstream. More or less, it's a social contract way of deterrence against bad behavior. It is not my job nor place to judge. My job is to open and close doors for these people. I just carry the keys, not their future. What they get out of their time in prison is up to them. No one is in prison for doing good, and I never forget that. Your take on what I have said is an oversimplification that lacks a lot of context. The prison system is not about sympathy at all. It is about empathy. It is about attempting to understand actions, identifying the symptoms, and treating the cause. For some, evil is a symptom of a problem that is chronic and can be changed. For others, they chose evil despite their comfort of good being around them. You can't expect a horse that starts at the finish line to be beaten. I never said I excused or felt sorry for anyone. I just said that I was or was not surprised by their outcomes.
Two people. One was for sure pure psychopath, while the other was just mentally destroyed sociopath that endured mental torture from his parenting. Both highly intelligent without remorse or idea that other humans are on par with them. They were unrelenting solipsists and nihilists. Both were narcissists, but the psychopath had more of a lure about them. They didn't talk that much or revealed a lot about them, just coasted the vibe of people around them and used and abused people. Sociopath was much more violent, impulsive, and outwardly angry, which he had to control, badly, to keep people around him wanting to be around him.
There's a diagnosed antisocial personality disorder in my family. It might be cringe to say, but Tony Soprano and Chris Moltisanti are pretty good representations of ASPD, half of the characters in the show really. They are not capable of making a connection between their actions and their consequences. Anyone that gets sick of or enforces laws and rules on them is either persecuting them personally or insane. According to them, basically everyone they have ever known is severely mentally ill.
Living like this or around someone like this sounds like pure hell.
Yeah, we aren't in contact anymore. To this day, I have no idea if he suffers or not. There would be times that he would express what seemed to be genuine and heart-rending anguish, but then if no one fawned over him, he'd turn on a dime and be happily watching TV or something a few seconds later like nothing had happened. Either that, or he would cycle through extreme, mutually exclusive emotions, like a random character generator, until he got the reaction, attention he wanted. Gave me the creeps, like a really dangerous toddler.
About 20 years ago, when I was a teenager working in fast food, I had this manager, Chris. He was extremely charming, stole money, sold drugs, tried to, and sometimes did sleep with the teen girls that worked there, and their friends would allude to other crimes he did to try and impress people. He actually gave a young teen me good advice about girls that landed me an out-of-my-league GF. Anyways, he stopped showing up to work, and we later found out he brutally murdered his father and someone else.
My old roommate during my first semester back in my dingy state university was a legitimate psychopath. He made my life a living hell for years, even after I'd stopped rooming with him. The scary part was the guy could come off as believable and honest, even when manipulating people. He genuinely ruined a few years of my life, making every moment a living hell. The worst part was, I couldn't do a thing about it. I'll keep it short because it's a very long story. B2014, freshman at a university. Meet my new roommate. Come off as a very genuine, caring person, someone who you could open up to. I befriended several girls. He sees one of them and decides he wants to sleep with her, despite the fact that she already has a boyfriend. She cheats with him. I don't agree with it, but I also don't really care. Starts locking me out of the dorm. Legitimately would push the dorm closet in front of the door so I couldn't get in. Confront him about it. Tells me how he views me as a good friend, apologizes, comes off as very genuine. Continues to lock me out of the room. Start carrying most of my school shit with me so I don't fail out. When I'm in the room alone with him, he starts seeing how he can get under my skin. Starts often repeating things that he knows pisses me off. I started seeing a girl. Literally click with this girl better than anyone I've ever met before or after. He introduced himself to her. Tell him to cut the shit and mind his own business, as I'm already suspicious of his intentions at that point. All of a sudden, girl I was seeing starts repeating same things he says to get under my skin, call her out on it. He had apparently been texting her often, telling her lies about me and repeating things to get under my skin, but framing it in a way of concern. React like a dumbass. I was only 18 and very inexperienced with girls. Stop seeing the girl, decide enough is enough. Switch rooms the following semester. I started to notice him following me to places. Would catch glimpses of him standing 100 or so feet back on my way to class or while hanging out with people. Start seeing him off campus, around stores in town. He never makes direct contact with me. Not sure what to do, so I just try to ignore it. One day a friend of mine comes up to me and describes a weird guy who came up and started shit talking about me all of a sudden. Of course, it's the old roommate. He would also go up to any females I associated with, claiming that I only wanted to pump and dump them. Most of the girls are obviously a bit freaked out by this and ask who the hell he was. Decide to confront him again, show up to his dorm. He's drunk as shit. Go for a walk with him. Doesn't listen to a word I say. He starts complaining about his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend, the same girl who he cheated with. Tell him I don't care. He spent months locking me out of the room whenever see visit and tough shit. Tell him to stop following me around and talking to my friends or I'd kick his ass. Don't see him for a few weeks. One day his girlfriend contacted me, asks for advice, saying he is insane and nobody will believe her. Tell her no shit and I'm not here to help her. She claims she wanted to break up with him, but he'd threaten to hero whenever the topic came up. He'd also do weird shit like snap his fingers and start barking orders. When she'd refuse, he'd cry and say that she is making him insecure. Tell her just to break up anyway. She does. Start noticing him following me around again. His now ex contacted me again and claimed he would show up to her dorm and try to force himself in or try to go up and kiss her in public, as they were still together. Tell her to threaten the cops if he showed up or touched her again. Apparently this works. One day I'm on my way to class. A Mustang skids in front of me. A middle-aged man comes out and shoves me. Confused but also humored. See old roommate standing on the other side of the car. Connect the dots. Oh, it's his dad. A guy tells me I'll never amount to anything and his son will be rich. Don't care, laugh in his face, then continue walking to class. Don't see him for months. One day I spotted him at a shitty Chinese buffet restaurant in my hometown during a break. Actually kind of freaked out now, he just smiles at me. I leave the place, more people on campus telling me he's coming up to them and saying strange shit about me. He's also claiming I stole his girlfriend. It's beyond stirring drama now. He's literally trying to ruin my life, even if unsuccessful for the most part. Some people actually believe some of the shit he spewed though. Like I mentioned earlier, he was very good at coming off as extremely genuine at first. Think about kicking the shit out of him. Decide it isn't worth getting expelled or arrested. Either way, this shit needs to end, go to school administration, and they more or less tell me I can't do shit without proof, and implied my story seems far-fetched. Social life is an awkward wreck at some point. Decide to call up his cheater ex-girlfriend. Tell her a bit more in-depth about the things he's been doing. She tells me he's been doing similar shit to her. Hatch a plan. She and I started hanging out together more often in public. We decided to make it look like we are a couple. We do this for about 6 months. This drives him crazy. He starts calling and texting her like 40 times a day, begging her to take him back, asking sexual questions, then sending angry threats of harrowing again. He more or less stops bothering me for a while. Jump ahead to my junior year. I hear a ton of people speaking outside of my dorm. Oh shit.jpg. He's with several guys in front of my dorm. They disperse into different directions. Decide to confront it then and there. Walk out into the hallway. He's gone. I walk down the hallway. 2 guys follow me. See 2 more by stairs. Decide to take the elevator. The 2 following me came into the elevator with me. The elevator gets to the first floor. 2 guys get out. 6 more waiting in front of the elevator. 4 on each side. Door closes. I'm blocked by a wall on the other side. Take a deep breath knowing what's about to happen. 1 grabs me. I punch him. Headbutt another down, then shove another guy into the wall. 3 grab me. I can't move except death. By God's grace, a friend of mine comes into the building and yells at them to stop. They argue with him for a few minutes while holding on to me. Forgot to mention they were all wearing a uniform of some sort. Not sure if it pertains to anything, just thought it was worth noting. Friend says I'm not the guy. I tell them I'm probably the guy, and I had seen them talking to my old roommate. Explain to them that he's insane and they fell for his bullshit. They all walk away in sequence. Friend as if I'm all right, tell him I'm fine. Never hear from my old roommate again. Assume they kicked his ass. See pic of him on Facebook years later, he got fat. Still talk to his ex on and off to this day, that's about it. Sorry for the blog post, half asleep, so I hope all of this sounded coherent.
I've met some. Mainly narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. Maybe that's just psychological nonsense used to describe evil people. But it's pretty well documented and there is a lot of research behind it. I'd say they probably have demonic influence. NPDs and sociopaths are easy to spot for me because they just seem off. Full-blown narcissists especially because they often give off an arrogant as hell, bragging vibe which dominates the room or whatever social circle they are in because that's how they operate, and usually don't have the self-awareness to see how ridiculous they are. Sociopaths are antisocial and obviously don't fit in, and usually don't give a damn about social norms, and that gives them away. Psychopaths can blend in and really do a lot of damage, and you probably met a few and just didn't know it. They just have smaller parts in their brain which makes them act like lizards at all time. It's just a dysfunction they have. They aren't necessarily evil, but by nature are deceptive and manipulative. I'd say they aren't always evil, especially if they are raised right. A lot of people in high-risk jobs are psychopathic because they don't feel as stressed out easily in tense situations, which makes them good fighter pilots, politicians, and stuff like that. I think I've never met a truly evil person, though. Just heard of them. Like Ted Bundy, for example.
Not really evil, but this guy is easily the person I've met most capable of doing some very evil things. He was a candidate with me in basic training. I was for a time in my country's military reserves. This guy was very obviously a major narcissist. He was very, very handsome, in a pretty boy way. He was constantly sucking up, or trying to suck up, to any of the course instructors in subtle ways. But I think everybody detected that he was trying to do that, so it wasn't very effective. There was something removed about him, and when you talked to him and looked in his eyes, you just got a sense he was vapid, petty, and didn't think about life very deeply. That on its own isn't too unusual, and you might expect such a person to be relatively harmless. But one day, we were sitting on our cots in the room we were sleeping in. We got our phones back that night. It was a Friday night, and during that segment of the course we had weekends off. He was scrolling through his phone and kind of laughing and smiling. For some reason, he calls me over and wants to show me what he's looking at. I go over to look, but immediately look away from the screen because he was trying to show me some very violent, bloody gore corn. I don't really want to describe it, but it was just a cacophony of brutality. Maybe a snuff film. I try to play it off and just make a face like UTF weird, as if it was more normal than it was, and I walk away. It might not sound too crazy, but I'm convinced that guy would do absolutely terrible things to people and not really think twice. A while ago, a friend was telling me about this book he read, something called The Banality of Evil, and the concept he was describing makes sense. We often attribute grand and deep traits to evil people, taking them to be fallen angels. But in the book, the author explores the fact that very often very evil people just have this vague boringness and vapidity to them.
Did he ever get angry?
Yes, often. He was smart enough to be servile to any authority, but there were all kinds of conflicts between him and other people on the course. To us, he was a known troublemaker, but not enough of a problem to really say anything. Just a guy none of us really liked.
I have come across a few truly evil people in my day. Jimmy Savile. Such a dark energy. Dank. The guy smelled like death and poop. He looked half dead too. Horrible human. This must have been in the early 2000s. I'll never forget the poor terrified kid that was having lunch with him that approached me to ask for help when he went to the bathroom. He told me that that guy wasn't his relative and he was very afraid of him. I called the cops and hid the kid in the office, waiting for them. The police arrived, but so did some kind of suits that did not identify themselves. They thinly threatened me. Did I know who that guy was, etc., etc. I told them to get fucked. The police eventually arrived and took the kid, and I pray to the gods that they didn't give it back to that monster. I never heard what happened to them after they left. I hope you didn't have to suffer anymore, Timmy. I also met GWB, another dark dude. Plays it goofy, but he is a monster. Also met Dr. Death, an infamous doctor that mysteriously has a crazy high death rate amongst his patients. Another very dark soul, no life left in his eyes. Also met a cop killer, former champion judo, killed a cop in cold blood with his bare hands, and feet, I guess. Did time for it. He had a glint in his eye that said that he knew that he could do it any time and not give AF. He was beyond help. Scary mofo.
I had a female roommate attack my wife, and I separated them by pushing her away. This was after months of psychological and physical taunting abuse towards us. I recorded everything during the incident, and yet she went to the police, lied, and said I attacked her, and got a temporary restraining order based on lies. I went to the cops, showed them the video. Bam, battery charges dropped. In restraining order court, I told her, please, Anon, let's just let this go. I can't believe it's come to this. When we first moved in together, I always thought you were an intelligent person. She had an engineering degree. Her hand was shaking and her eyes widened like a maniac. She said with a growl, "No! I want the police to be able to look you up every time they pull you over." I just walked away. We settled it in mediation. The mediator was on my side and scared the hell out of her. I would have won in court, but whatever. Women are insane. I think she secretly liked me and desperately wanted to outsmart me.
Nobody was or is evil, even if they commit the most heinous acts and declare themselves to be evil and against humanity, Earth, the whole universe, or even existence itself. Everyone thinks or believes that they are doing something which will better their life in some way. Their view of reality may be skewed and their ideas completely insane. But nobody is capable of existing as some kind of complete menace or pure evil. That is and always will be fiction. Of course, if you look at their actions from a certain standpoint, righteous, good, holy, or whatever, then you will automatically ascribe qualities to them. But if you see reality as it is, then it is not true to say that they are bad or good for that matter. All these judgments we pass are essentially for survival's sake, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's necessary and unavoidable if we want to live. But if we put survival aside and see things the way they really are, then no, there is no evil person anywhere.
When I was a drug addict, I lived in the worst building in my city, by far the worst. Almost all murders happen in this one building nicknamed The Project. It was literal hell on earth. Small, fucking destroyed apartment building that's constantly packed. There will be 12 people staying in one bachelor suite that costs like $300 a month. You can knock on any apartment in that building and find any drug or a gun. Tons of drug dealers. I've seen dealers hotshot people to get revenge for shit. Spike their bag of fentanyl to be extra strong to kill them. Saw a friend get his head blown off with a shotgun over an 8-ball of meth. Just so many genuinely terrible people. If you see your phone or something down in that building, it'll be gone in seconds. Also, open-air drug market in the courtyard. Cops drive through several times a day and still can't stop it. There was this like 80-year-old man that lived there that was a big fentanyl dealer. He would bring in young girls all day, every day. They'd do him in exchange for fent. Had a harem of hookers that lived with him. Fucked up place. I'll never set foot in there again. Every time I drive by that building, I get intense anxiety.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.